Washington, D.C., would you have the courage to speak the truth, even if no one believed you? Noah Carter sat in the courtroom, his small hands clenched into fists on his lap. The heavy wooden bench beneath him felt too big, the air too cold. He wasn't supposed to be here. A 10-year-old boy shouldn't have to fight for justice, but he had no choice. His father, Anthony Carter, had been a brilliant businessman, a visionary. He and his business partner, William Harrington, had built one of the most successful companies in Washington, D.C. Together, they had changed industries, created jobs, and built a legacy that should have lasted a lifetime. But one night, Anthony Carter never made it home. The official story was a tragic accident. A car crash, a miscalculation on the road that ended his life too soon. At least, that's what William Harrington had told the world. But Noah's mother, Jasmine Carter, knew the truth. She had spent the past year fighting to expose the lie. Harrington had orchestrated Anthony's death to take full control of the company. And now, after months of legal battles and desperate attempts to prove what really happened, they were here, in court, facing the man who had stolen everything from them. The room was packed. Reporters filled the benches, their cameras flashing as they captured the moment. Lawyers whispered among themselves, preparing their arguments. Harrington sat at his table, dressed in an expensive suit, his face calm, his demeanor calculated. He didn't look nervous. He didn't look guilty. He looked powerful. Noah's stomach twisted. He had spent months hearing his mother cry at night, watching her struggle to keep their family afloat while Harrington flourished. It wasn't fair. His father had built that company, had trusted his business partner, had believed they were working toward something greater. And in the end, that trust had cost him his life. The judge called the courtroom to order, and the trial began. Noah sat perfectly still, listening as the lawyers argued back and forth. His mother squeezed his hand, offering silent strength. He wanted to believe that justice would prevail, that the truth would be enough. But then the defense lawyer stood. "There is no evidence tying my client to Mr. Carter's death," he said smoothly. "This case is built on emotion, not facts." Noah's jaw clenched. Lies, all of it. Harrington leaned back in his chair, his lips curling into a slight smirk. He thought he had already won. Noah's heart pounded. He couldn't let this happen. He couldn't let his father's murderer walk free. He had only one chance to make them listen. Slowly, he reached into his pocket, his fingers closing around the small object inside. The one thing that could change everything. The truth. Anthony Carter had built his empire with hard work and integrity. He and William Harrington had started from nothing, working late nights and sacrificing everything to grow their company into one of the most influential businesses in Washington, D.C. They had been equal partners in every way, until greed changed everything. Anthony had trusted Harrington. He had believed in their shared vision, their commitment to honesty. But that trust had been misplaced. One evening, Anthony uncovered discrepancies in their financial records. Large sums of money had been siphoned away, funneled into untraceable accounts. At first, he thought it was a mistake. But as he dug deeper, the truth became undeniable. Harrington had been stealing from their company for years. Anthony confronted him in his office, fury burning in his chest. "How could you do this?" he demanded, slamming the incriminating documents onto the desk. Harrington didn't even flinch. He leaned back in his leather chair, his expression smooth. "You're overreacting," he said casually. "It's just business." Anthony felt his blood run cold. He had spent his life building this company. It wasn't just business. It was everything he had worked for. "I'm going to the board with this," Anthony said. "First thing in the morning." Harrington's smile never wavered. "You won't get the chance." That night, Anthony Carter never made it home. The news reported it as a robbery gone wrong. His body was found near his car in a parking garage, his wallet missing, his injuries consistent with an attack. But Jasmine Carter didn't believe it. Something wasn't right. She started asking questions, but the deeper she looked, the more roadblocks she hit. Security footage from the parking garage was mysteriously missing. Financial records had been altered, key evidence erased. The police refused to push further. No one wanted to investigate a powerful white businessman. Harrington had won, or so he thought. Now, a year later, Jasmine sat in a courtroom staring at the man who had stolen everything from her family. Beside her, Noah clutched his hands in his lap, his eyes locked on Harrington. They had one last chance to prove the truth. But what no one knew, what even Jasmine didn't know, was that Noah had something that could change everything. A single piece of evidence, and he was about to use it. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled, every eye locked on the proceedings. Reporters lined the back, their notepads ready. Executives whispered among themselves, exchanging skeptical glances. Legal experts watched with keen interest, some intrigued, others doubtful. This was a high-profile case, and everyone wanted to see how it would unfold. At the defense table, William Harrington sat comfortably, his confidence unshaken. He had been in courtrooms before, always emerging unscathed. Money had a way of making problems disappear, and he had plenty of it. His suit was immaculate, his expression one of amusement. To him, this was nothing more than a formality. A minor inconvenience. Across the room, Noah Carter clutched his mother's hand, his small fingers wrapped tightly around hers. He could feel her pulse racing just as his own heart pounded in his chest. The weight of what he was about to do pressed heavily on his young shoulders. The family's lawyer stood adjusting her glasses. "Your Honor, the prosecution calls Noah Carter to the stand." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Whispers spread like wildfire. A child? Testifying in a corporate crime case? Harrington barely concealed his smirk. His lawyer leaned back in his chair, shaking his head as if this was a joke. "Your Honor, I must object. What can a little boy possibly know about corporate crime?" Noah took a steadying breath. His hands trembled slightly, but he forced himself to stand. He walked forward, each step echoing in the silent room. When he reached the witness stand, he climbed into the chair, straightened his back, and met Harrington's gaze head-on. The bailiff swore him in, and the judge gestured for the questioning to begin. Noah's lawyer approached, her voice calm but firm. "Noah, can you tell the court why you're here today?" Noah swallowed hard, then nodded. "To tell the truth." The courtroom fell silent. Harrington's smirk faltered. Noah gripped the edge of the stand, his young voice steady. "Because my dad trusted the wrong person, and I can prove it." A hush fell over the room. Everyone waited. Everyone held their breath. And then Noah reached into his pocket. It was time to expose it all. The tension in the courtroom was suffocating. Every eye was on Noah, waiting. The judge leaned forward slightly, curiosity flickering across his face. Even the reporters had stopped scribbling, their pens frozen in midair. "Noah," the lawyer said gently, "tell the court what you found." Noah reached into his pocket and pulled out a small USB drive. His fingers shook slightly, but his voice was steady. "My dad gave me this the night before he died." Gasps rippled through the room. Harrington's smirk vanished, his body going rigid. The lawyer took the drive and handed it to the court technician. Moments later, the large screen at the front of the room lit up. A grainy video played, a recording from Anthony Carter's home office. Anthony's face appeared on the screen, his voice calm but urgent. "If anything happens to me, Harrington did it." The courtroom erupted. Shocked murmurs filled the air. Noah's mother covered her mouth, tears brimming in her eyes. The judge banged his gavel. "Order! Order in the court!" Harrington's face turned white. He leaned toward his lawyer, whispering frantically, but there was no escaping this. The video continued. Anthony turned his laptop screen toward the camera, revealing a document. "I have proof. He's been stealing from the company for years. He's planning to take me out. If I don't make it to the board meeting tomorrow, you'll know why." Noah clenched his fists. His father had known. He had tried to stop it. But Harrington had been faster. And then the final clip played. A recorded meeting between Anthony and Harrington. Harrington's voice came through the speakers, dripping with venom. "You're making a mistake, Anthony. You don't want to be my enemy." Anthony's voice was clear. "I won't let you steal from me, Harrington. And I won't let you get away with it." The screen froze on Harrington's face, caught mid-threat. Silence suffocated the room. The truth was no longer just an accusation. It was undeniable. The lies were falling apart. Noah had just turned the case upside down. The prosecutor stood, his voice unwavering. "Your Honor, this evidence changes everything." The courtroom was in chaos. Reporters whispering, jurors exchanging glances, the audience leaning forward in their seats. The weight of what they had just witnessed settled like a heavy cloud over the room. Harrington's lawyer shot to his feet. "This doesn't prove anything," he protested, his voice a little too frantic. The judge's expression was unreadable, but his tone was firm. "It proves motive." Jasmine Carter clutched her chest, tears streaming silently down her face. "They tried to silence him," she whispered, barely loud enough to be heard. But the words carried through the courtroom like thunder. Harrington, who had been silent for too long, suddenly found his voice. "This is a setup," he barked, his usual composure cracking. "This video, it could have been fabricated. My company has been under attack for months." The jury wasn't convinced. They exchanged knowing glances. The truth was undeniable now, no matter how much money or power Harrington had once wielded. The defense lawyer cleared his throat, scrambling for control. "Your Honor, we request an immediate investigation." The judge nodded, his voice calm but decisive. "Effective immediately. William Harrington is to be taken into custody." The courtroom gasped. The bailiffs moved toward him, their presence final and unshakable. Harrington shot up from his seat, knocking over a glass of water. "You can't do this! I built an empire!" His voice, once commanding, now sounded desperate. The handcuffs clicked around his wrists. For the first time, his power meant nothing. The cameras flashed, capturing the moment. Reporters scribbled furiously. Jasmine gripped Noah's hand tightly, a sob escaping her lips, this time not out of grief, but relief. Noah's heart pounded in his chest. He had done it. His father's murderer was finally facing justice. And just like that, the world watched as a billionaire fell. The jury had been gone for only an hour. Noah sat still, his fingers laced tightly with his mother's, his heart pounding in his chest. He had spent months trapped in uncertainty, surrounded by doubt, fighting against a system that had never been in his favor. But now the end was near. The heavy wooden doors creaked open, and the jurors filed back into the room, their faces unreadable. The audience held its breath. Cameras clicked. Reporters leaned in, ready to capture history. The judge cleared his throat. As the jury reached a verdict, a woman in the front row of the jury stood clutching a folded slip of paper. "We have, Your Honor." Noah swallowed hard, his grip tightening around his mother's hand. The bailiff took the slip of paper and handed it to the judge. The courtroom remained deathly silent as he unfolded it, his eyes scanning the words carefully before he spoke. "On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant guilty." The courtroom erupted. Reporters sprang into action, cameras flashing, pens scratching against notepads. The murmur of the crowd rose into cheers. Some gasped, others whispered in shock, but all of them knew they had just witnessed justice. Noah exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His mother let out a quiet sob and pulled him into her arms, holding him so tightly he thought she'd never let go. "You did it," she whispered. "Your father would be so proud." Tears burned in Noah's eyes, but he refused to let them fall. Instead, he focused on the front of the courtroom, where William Harrington sat frozen. His face had lost all color. His jaw clenched as the weight of the verdict settled over him like a crushing force. The judge turned his gaze toward Noah, his stern expression softening. "Young man, you are one of the bravest people I have ever seen in this courtroom." Noah met his gaze and nodded, his heart swelling with something unfamiliar. Relief. For the first time in months, he felt safe. But just as the bailiffs moved toward Harrington to take him away, something unexpected happened. Something that would change everything again. Harrington's downfall sent shockwaves through the country. His once mighty corporation crumbled overnight, investors fleeing, stocks plummeting. The power he had spent years building meant nothing now. The case dominated national headlines, a story of greed, betrayal, and one boy's unshakable courage. People from all walks of life found strength in Noah's fight, inspiring others to stand up against corruption and injustice. He had not just won a case, he had started something bigger. Noah and his mother stood outside the courthouse, surrounded by a sea of flashing cameras. Journalists pushed forward, eager for a statement. "Noah," one called out, "what's next for you?" He hesitated, glancing at his mother. She smiled, giving him a reassuring nod. He turned back to the reporter, standing a little taller. "I want to be a lawyer," he said, his voice steady, "so no one can silence the truth again." The crowd erupted in applause. His words carried far beyond the courthouse steps, reaching hearts across the nation. His mother pulled him into a tight embrace. "Your father would be so proud," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Noah wiped his eyes, the weight of it all settling in. He could feel it, the shift, the change. This wasn't just about his family anymore. "I know," he whispered back. That day, Noah Carter had won his battle, but in the end, he had started a revolution.